Good morning. My name is Cynthia Zimmer. I am Kern County's District Attorney. I have information about Orrin and Orson West, the two young boys who were reported missing from California City 14 months ago. On December 21st of 2020, Orrin was 4 years old and Orson was 3 years old. Their adoptive parents in California City, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, reported to the California City Police Department that the boys had disappeared from their backyard. The California City Police Department began a search for the boys in the area around their home. After a period of time, the FBI joined in the search, as did the California Highway Patrol and search and rescue from the Kern County Sheriff's Department. The community also came out to assist in looking for the boys, but to no avail. They were not located. 1 week later, crucial information came to light that necessitated the involvement of the Bakersfield Police Department and the Kern County District Attorney's Office. Law enforcement worked diligently, hundreds of hours in the next 12 months, looking for the boys. This morning, I'm saddened to announce that the investigation has revealed that Orrin and Orson West are deceased. The investigation has also revealed that they died 3 months before their adoptive parents reported them missing. However, I am pleased to announce that this week, the Kern County Grand Jury indicted Trezell and Jacqueline West, the adoptive parents, for the murder of Orrin and Orson West. The indictment charges 5 counts. The first count is murder. Charges them both with murder, with the victim being Orrin West. The second count charges murder, with the victim being Orson West. The third count charges felony child abuse against the person of Orrin West. The fourth count charges child abuse against the person of Orson West. And the fifth count charges false report of an emergency. Naturally, the first 2 counts carry the most time in state prison, murder. It is charged as murder in the 2nd degree. That carries 15 years to life, but with 2 victims, the potential penalty, or the maximum possible penalty, if convicted, is 30 years to life for each defendant, Trezell and Jacqueline West. Now, the grand jury indictment is a formal charging document, and we followed a process in charging them before the grand jury, and that was the district attorney requested that the grand jury convene to hear evidence regarding an indictment that we presented them. The district attorney's office then presented information to the grand jury, and the grand jury found there was sufficient evidence to hold Trezell and Jacqueline West responsible for these murders, and they returned what was called a true bill. So oftentimes we call it they were indicted, but what they did is returned a true bill on the indictment. Department 1 Superior Court judge issued warrants for the arrest of the defendants, and they were arrested last night at about 7 p.m. in Kern County. They are currently in the Kern County Jail waiting for an arraignment on the indictment, which will be tomorrow. There will be no preliminary hearing in this case because an indictment is a substitute for a preliminary hearing, and this case will proceed directly to trial. The announcement of an indictment in this case probably raises a lot of questions. Questions about the facts of the case and what you and the public would like to know. I'm not permitted to go over the facts of the case in this case, but there is something that I'd like to discuss because the facts of the case are to be what we produce in the jury trial, because we want both the prosecution and the defense to have a fair trial in this case. However, one of the questions that I'm sure you would like to know is, have the bodies of Orrin and Orson been found? And the answer to that is no, they have not been found. However, I would like to emphasize that the fact that law enforcement have not found their bodies does not preclude a murder prosecution. As a matter of fact, there have been many hundreds of what we call no-body homicides prosecuted across the United States successfully, and even no-body homicides have resulted in murder convictions in Kern County. I'd like to introduce the people who are standing here with me today who have been crucial in bringing this case forward. Eric Smith is the person to my right here. Eric Smith is the supervisor of the homicide unit at the DA's office. Next to him is Brian Estep, also a homicide prosecutor in the DA's office, and these two gentlemen are the people from my office who presented the evidence to the grand jury, and this grand jury hearing began 3 months ago in December of 2021. Mr. Smith, would you like to come say a few words?
On behalf of myself and, of course, Deputy District Attorney Brian Estep, I would like to thank the allied agencies who worked tirelessly throughout this investigation. That includes also the Kern Regional Crime Lab and also the DA investigators in this case. Kern County law enforcement worked together at first in an attempt to locate Orrin and Orson West, and as that continued, it turned into the investigation into the disappearance and ultimately the homicide of the two boys. The lead investigative agencies, Bakersfield Police Department, California City Police Department, they worked tirelessly throughout the course of this over a year since this occurred to follow up on leads and complete the investigation. Investigation that was continued even throughout the grand jury hearing. The indictment itself took approximately 3 months. Over 50 witnesses testified during the course of the indictment. Much of those witnesses' testimony was extremely emotional as it related to this case, but that's to be expected from a case that involves the murder of two innocent children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. To my left are two chiefs of the lead agencies in this case that did most of the work. Bakersfield Police Chief Greg Terry and California City Police Chief John Walker. Chief Terry, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is not the outcome that we and so many had hoped and prayed for over the last year. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of Orrin and Orson who, with this news today, their worst fears have been realized. I want to express my pride and appreciation to our homicide team, who invested so much personally and professionally to find the truth in this investigation. We now realize that the search for the boys began after the real tragedy had already occurred. But it is the work and diligence of the investigators, our partners, California City Police Department, the FBI, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and many, many other law enforcement agencies, community members, our own community members, and members of the public. That diligence, that refusal to give up is why we are here today. I also want to express my appreciation to our District Attorney, Cindy Zimmer, for her leadership and for her commitment to the safety of our families here in Kern County, no matter how difficult the case. We also would not be here without the teamwork and support of the District Attorney staff. They provided invaluable support to our investigators, a perspective and advice and counsel along the way. And again, we would not be here without that support as well. And the last thing I would say is this is not a resolution in this case. And there will not be a resolution completely in this case until these boys are brought home.
Thank you, Chief Terry. Chief Walker, would you like to address the audience?
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Let me emphasize, first and foremost, this is a tragedy, an absolute tragedy that was reported in my city, that two small boys could be killed by their parents. But I do have to say how proud I am of my department from the second we got the call until we brought in so many resources, and we're very grateful for that. But the second we got the call, we were on scene. We began to work it and look for these kids. And we had so many agencies involved, Kern County Sheriffs, the Search and Rescue, CHP came with their helicopter to help us. But the citizens of Cal City came out in numbers to look for these kids. And it began to grow to the outlying communities and eventually across the nation. We were getting people who were interested and they wanted to know where these kids were as well as us. And then eventually Chief Terry and the Bakersfield PD came in to help us out, and they've been instrumental to make this happen. So I want to thank all those people again for helping us to try to come to some kind of resolution with this. But again, the bottom line is we have two small boys that we believe are no longer here that are dead, and that's terrible. But again, I want to thank the District Attorney, Cindy Zimmer, for being brave and diligent to push this forward and actually bring this case to the surface. So we will push forward. We haven't given up, and we'll continue to give them any kind of help that they would need in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Walker. While the defendants in this case, Trezell and Jacqueline West, are presumed innocent, the securing of a grand jury indictment is a major step in ensuring that there will be justice for Orrin and Orson. This case has tugged at the heartstrings of people in my office and in law enforcement and in this community. It is a horrific tragedy that these precious little boys had to lose their lives. But I want to thank everyone who was involved in this case, the law enforcement officers. It must have been so difficult for them who searched for Orrin and Orson, the community members that came out and helped search, and then the community members that just continue to care about what happened to them. So if you have any questions, those are the end of my comments. But keep in mind, there are ethical restraints as far as what we can talk about prior to the trial in this case.
Well, let me try, Cindy.
Thank you. I think he had his hand up first.
Thank you, District Attorney. How can we confirm that the boys had died 3 months prior to their reported disappearance if bodies haven't been found? Can you kind of explain how that works?
No, I cannot, but I can tell you the facts in court will show that we were able to prove that to the grand jury, that the boys have died, that they were murdered, and we did that through a combination of direct and circumstantial evidence, and the grand jury was convinced that they were dead. Thank you.
Given that you say that they died 3 months before this was reported, and that the fact that Trezell and Jacqueline lived in Bakersfield and then moved to California City, Chief Walker, do you believe, can anybody say whether Orrin and Orson were ever in California City to begin with?
Mr. Gaspar, that's a good question, and that's something we're going to answer during the trial.
Can't say more than that.
We cannot go into the facts of the case.
As far as trying a case without a body, because since I assume you don't know where the boys are. Is that right?
We don't know where their bodies are. That's what I said.
Okay, so you don't know where their bodies are. What will that present kind of a difficulty in trying this case without a body? Public out there has, at least some that I've run into, say, well, they can't try somebody without a body. How are they going to do that?
As I explained in my earlier statements, no body homicides are tried all the time. And we have evidence that was sufficient to convince the grand jury, and we have sufficient evidence that we believe will convince a jury that they are not alive. And we have evidence.
Have you tried a case here without a body before in Kern County?
Yes, we have tried to successfully, at least that I know off the top of my head. I have those names, the Leonard Bryce Thomas case and the Daniel Rhodes case, successful murder convictions. And there may be more, but those are two that I can remember. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about why second-degree murder in this case rather than first?
No, I cannot. I can't really discuss the theory of liability in the case because that would involve the facts.
Okay. And then also, I'm so sorry, one more question. Can you talk a little bit about why you guys decided to go down the grand jury route and attain that rather than the average procedure?
We try, I've done over 20 grand jury indictments myself throughout my career. It is something that we commonly do on homicide cases, which involve calling live witnesses. And also sometimes we do it because there has to be a little bit of starting and stopping regarding scheduling. A preliminary hearing is continuous. You don't have start and stops. And at a grand jury hearing, you can do 2 days of testimony 1 week, 1 day, so there are a variety of reasons that we considered in this case, and a lot of, if you look back on some of our high-profile homicide cases, most of them did go to grand jury. Yes.
We have unconfirmed reports that a white RV was pulled over by law enforcement yesterday at Highway 43 and Highway 58. And some were saying this was possibly where Trezell and Jacqueline were taken into custody. Are you able to confirm that? And also, near Potomac Avenue, the neighborhood where Trezell and Jacqueline had been living with his parents after they moved back from California City, there was a helicopter with a searchlight going over around, I want to say, 7, 8 o'clock last night. Can you confirm that that was looking for Trezell and Jacqueline?
The defendants, Trezell and Jacqueline West, were taken into custody last night around 7 p.m. by the Bakersfield Police Department in western Kern County.
How did that happen? How did you find out that the Winnebago that was there? We had spotted it earlier in the day in Edison, and then it was the same Winnebago that you guys found yesterday. Can you say what tipped you off that the Winnebago was there at Enos Lane and Highway 58?
No. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What does this say about the vetting and background process for adopting parents here in Kern County?
Ma'am, it's not the job of the district attorney to talk about those types of things. It's the job of the district attorney to look and see if a crime was committed and bring those guilty parties to justice. Yes.
Are the defendants cooperating, and have they admitted to any wrongdoing?
I can't discuss. That is absolutely prohibited. Any type of statements by the ethical canons that attorneys are required to follow. I won't comment on the evidence specifically. I won't comment on statements. Yes.
Are these the only arrests that are going to be taking place in this case? Is there plans to bring in anybody else or to arrest anybody else involved in this?
If I had those plans, I probably wouldn't tell you, but I can't tell you anyway. It's a good question. I don't mean to be trite, but I'm not going to comment on that. Yes.
I'm sorry, I do
Go
have
ahead.
one more. We do know that Orson and Orrin were 2 of 4 adopted kids. They also had another 2 biological kids. Any idea of the whereabouts of the other 2 adopted kids and the biological kids as well? And were there any signs or prior signs of prior abuse in the household with the other 4 kids?
I'm not able to discuss that, but it's not like the other 4 are missing. They are in the care and custody of the Child Protective Services. Yes.
Were Trezell and Jacqueline West under surveillance for a considerable amount of time before you made an arrest?
I cannot answer that. I mean, I know, but I shouldn't be answering that. Yes.
Have you spoken to the biological parents of Orrin and Orson since you learned of this news, and if so, what was their reaction to this finding?
Well, Mr. Smith has had contact with some of the biological family in this case, and I would have to defer to him about that. Our office, grand jury proceedings are secret. They are confidential. They are not to be revealed until after an arrest is made in this case, and in any case. So we will, now that there has been an arrest made, we'll be able to talk to the family of the victims more so, but even before that, we weren't able to really go into detail with them, although I can tell you we have had contact with the family.
Was it a unanimous vote with the grand jury to bring forth the indictment?
I don't think that's something that can ever be revealed. I think that's confidential information in the hands of the grand jury. I can tell you that there was sufficient number to do it, or it wouldn't have been a valid indictment. But whether it was unanimous or not unanimous, I don't know, because they don't tell us.
Can you say which legal counsel will represent the suspects?
They will be arraigned tomorrow in court, and if they cannot afford counsel, they will be appointed, or if they want to retain counsel, they can do that. So we don't know. We won't know in the criminal matter who their attorneys will be until tomorrow morning.
How do you guys plan to bring this news to the biological family? Obviously, you know, we're saying you guys have given confirmation that both boys are diseased as well, but there's no concrete evidence showing this. It sort of feels what's been going on for almost the past year, where the family and the community has sort of been left without any answers, and that constant question has been brought up. You know, where are the boys? And I mean, you're saying there's concrete, or you know, confirmation that they are diseased, but how will you guys?
It's called a jury trial, sir.
Okay.
That's where we will prove that they are deceased, and we have and the grand jury has already found that they are deceased, and we have presented evidence that. As far as the news that went to the biological family, I think the news did that last night. I think you were out at the scene with the biological family before we were even had the defendants in custody or had an opportunity to do this press statement today. So as far as news to the family, I think that I think they already know.
Question?
Yes, and just a couple more questions, please.
Could you talk a little bit about the sentencing for the other two charges, the willful cruelty to the child? What's kind of the average for that as well?
Well, what that term carries is 6 years.
Okay.
Correct, Mr. Smith? 6 years.
And would that be changed because there's 2 counts of that, or for each of them?
That's kind of a complicated sentencing question. You look to see if the conduct supporting the homicide charge, and you take what's called it's a determining sentencing, whether or not you get any more time on the child abuse cases counts if they're convicted on the murder. Kind of depends on the facts and circumstances.
Okay.
I have a question for Chief John Walker. You did submit your resignation recently to the department to resign as chief of the California City Police Department. Can you give us a reason, you know, why you've decided to resign from the department, your plans, or so forth?
I think that really has no bearing on this, so, you know, I'd like to stick to the subject, but yes, I've been there for 2 years, I've done my best, and it's time for me to move on.
Are there any more questions? One last question. Yes?
I know you can't say how the boys were murdered. I understand that. Can you say if you believe you know how it happened, though?
No, I can't say anything like that. We are prohibited from going into the facts of the case. And obviously, we know what the facts of the case are. I can't go into anything further than that. And we just invite you to cover the trial in which the facts will be produced. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for your excellent questions. I hope I was able to answer them to the extent that I could. You all have a very nice day.